Can you hear me?
Commissioner Stites, can you hear us?
I can.
Thank you. Okay, just one more reminder for everyone. If you are here to address the commission or when you address the commission, please come to the podium. Make sure you turn your mic on. Please don't speak from the back of the room. We can't pick you up. And when we try and transcribe it, we can't hear it. We want to make sure we get everyone's comments. And also, please state your name and title every time you speak. Thank you.
by uh, for for those four. We have each department is going to have a check for uphold physical sustainability and then also focus on service and communication because we believe every department should concentrate on those and ranks high in those. With foster economic development and improve infrastructure. Not everyone will receive a check for that. This information was pulled from our priority-based budgeting database. And so if they scored a 2 or higher, that department would get a check based on that. So the first set of functional departments we're going to go through is public safety. There's 7 departments there. Again, there's $112 million for the tax for the county general or the county levy funds. So this particular group of departments makes up 44% of that pie at about $56 million. Largest department there is the sheriff at $42 million. Then we have police dispatch, UG security, fire dispatch, emergency management, and community corrections. And we can see that sheriff is 78% of that. Police dispatch is 10%. The next largest one would be UG security. So diving into the sheriff's department, we can see that sheriff's department does have the 2 checks for customer service and also upholding physical sustainability. And we can see that 76% of the sheriff's budget is made up of personnel. That's about $32 million. They also have 284 FTEs with a total budget of, again, of $42 million. Most of their funding comes from the county general fund. On the slide, the pie chart to the right shows the county general fund. It shows the portion of the county general fund that funds the sheriff. So we can see that it's 52%. And then we have the blocks in red, yellow, and green. So the red state and federal mandates. We can see there's civil service / warrants, court transport, investigations, jail authority and juvenile detention center operations, and residential medical programs that the sheriff does have mandated at a state or a federal level. Then there are commission mandates that are local mandates that the unified government came up with at some point in time. And those are public safety interlocal programs, and then resident out of county transport travel, jail training, sheriff general operations, and tag enforcement. And then there's the best practices. Sheriff also does receive funding outside the county general fund from a jail commissary fund, which is a special revenue fund within the sheriff's office. Next, we have UG security. UG security is a combination between sheriff security and also police security. So we can see sheriff security is about $1.8 million, and police security on the county side is 486,000. We see FTE count on the sheriff side is 22 FTEs, and police security is 5.6 FTEs. And we can see that this is about 3% of the county general fund's expenses. And it just kind of give you a glimpse of county general fund itself is like an $84 million budget. And this is a commission mandate, a mandate that we did put on ourselves to have courthouse security and then UG security. And some of our elected officials that have departments, they do have to get out of here early. So I don't know if you would have some questions for Sheriff Soptic based on the slides that we just went through for him. The next set of departments we're looking at are public safety dispatch. Public safety dispatch is made up of two departments. You have fire dispatch and you also have police dispatch. So fire dispatch has 13 FTEs and police dispatch has 53 FTEs. This is a best practice, it is not mandated. And we can see that the costs are 86%, 86% of their costs are personnel. And it is a department that received checks for all four of our goals. Next department is emergency management. It has a total budget of almost $1.8 million, has a total FTE of 6 FTEs. Also commission priorities, it does rank on 2 of them. Also, we can see personnel is 29% of their budget, and then contractual service are 46% of that budget. And it does make up 2% of the $84 million county general fund. And we can see most of the programs or services that it does offer or state or federal mandate, with 2 being best practice. Next department we're looking at is community corrections. It's about $1.8 million and has 10 FTEs. Most of their funding does come from grants that come through the state. And they do make up about, or they do make up about 1% of the county general fund, which again is an $84 million budget. So some of the things that they have to do are corrections advisory board and comprehensive correction plan. Then they do have best practices of drug court diversion program and pretrial programs. Next set of departments are our judicial service departments. So a lot of this information that we have as far as mandates and best practices were pulled together in our priority-based budgeting software. And these departments here, we don't have any information on in our priority-based budgeting software. So you won't see mandates for these departments. But we can see there's a total of $11 million for these departments with a district attorney. There's $7.8 million. District court is about $2.8 million, and the court trustee is $683,000. Looking at the district attorney, again, its budget is about a $7.8 million budget. They have almost 72 FTEs. And their total budget as part of the county general fund is 9% of it. And again, that's an $84 million budget. And we have district court with a $2.8 million budget, and their FTEs are 12 and a quarter. We can see that they make up about 3% of the county general fund. And again, the county general fund again is an $84 million budget. Court trustee, which is part of the district courts, has a $683,000 budget and has 8.5 FTEs. Its funding is its own fund. It's a special revenue fund. So the funds that it brings in or what they use to operate it. So there's no money coming from like any of the tax levy funds. It has its own funding. So that is a summary of judicial services budgets. And I do know District Attorney Dupree does have to take off also. I don't know if there's any questions for him before he has to get out of here. All right, our next set of functional departments are our community service departments. Here we have like 10 departments, with the biggest one being Parks and Recreation at $9.6 million. Then we have the Health Department, Appraiser's Office, Elections, Transit, Register of Deeds, and Human Services. And then also Aging, Economic Development, and Neighborhood Resource Center. Again, we see the biggest piece of the pie is Parks and Rec, and then comes Health Department. And then we also have the appraiser there at 13%. So drilling down into consolidated parks, they do have a total budget of $9.6 million. However, $4.9 million of this does come from the city general fund and an appropriation of a transfer that we do each year. Parks and Rec does get all 4 checks for upholding physical sustainability and focus on service and communication, and then economic development, and then improving infrastructure. We can see as far as FTEs, they have a total of 90 FTEs, and it is 68% of personnel. 68, their cost for personnel, 68% of their total budget. And they do not receive any funding from the county general fund. It does have its own tax levy fund that is on the county side. And we can see as far as state and federal mandates, things that they have to do at that level are noxious weeds and chemicals and cemetery maintenance. And then us as a unified government, we do have some commission mandates as far as beautification and tree maintenance, median maintenance, park maintenance, recreation maintenance, and facility maintenance. Our next department is the health department.
We got a question. Commissioner Burrows.
Reggie, I'm really trying to follow you, and the question I have, and maybe you stated this at the beginning, you've got the state mandates, state and federal mandates and commission mandates. The best practice, that comes from, was that AI generated, or are these just programs that have gone into, I'm just looking, I'll use the parks one, just one slide back, but I see all of these things that are best practice. Those aren't necessarily things that we have chosen, or those programs that are presently in place. I'm trying to look at how I would review those if I saw them on a document and didn't have any knowledge about it.
Okay, so the best practices are programs that that are within our budget, and they are programs or services that, for instance, Parks and Rec does provide to the community. So we do have budget dollars attached to those. They just don't have any mandates on them at the local level or the state level, saying that there is something that we have to do.
Well, now you said something we have to do. That's by commission mandate, or?
So the commission mandate is definitely like local mandates that we have here at the unified government.
Mhm.
And then the state and federal mandates are like mandated at the state level or at the federal level.
Well, I'll just use an example, if I may. Fishing and boating sales. I mean, that's one of these that is best practices. What do we, as a commission and Parks and Rec, know about boating sales? I mean, that's, when I see that, that's just one thing, it raises a flag. Do we fund something for that, or is that mandated through the commission? Was that something set up decades ago with the park? I'm just trying to understand, because I see senior programs, but we also have an aging budget also. But I'm just wanting to, if I had to go in and look at consolidated parks and recs, I'm going to look at state, federal mandate, commission mandate. Best practices is my subjective services.
Yeah,
Program?
yes. So I mean, they are discretionary spending that, I mean, there's something that we don't have to do.
Okay. Thank you. That explains it. It's discretionary funding. Appreciate that. Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm reading, because at first I found it a little confusing. I was trying to follow. Then when I saw this one, it came to light. Appreciate that. Thank you. Discretionary funding.
You about to want to say something?
Thank you. Commissioner Burns has a question.
Reggie, I trust that some of the state mandates were passed when Burroughs was in the legislature. Is that right?
I'm sorry.
I can't say I could, I don't know which ones exactly would have been passed when he was there, but there is that possibility.
If it's a state mandate in 26 years, there's a chance it did come before me. I know I didn't mandate the fishing and boat sales.
So, Michael Peterson, Deputy Budget Director, I was just gonna say, I think the word sales probably was put there in error. So that's meant to be, like fishing license activity, fish stocking, and the boating activity that happens at Wyandotte County Lake. So I'm sure Parks and Rec could speak more to it if we want them to, but it's not sales of boats and fish.
Okay, Commissioner Lopez.
So like when you're saying like, when people are buying their permits to boat on the lake and then the permits they're buying, they're spending money for fishing permits and things like that, right? We're not spending money on, we're not spending money coming in, right?
Yeah, that's what that would be, yes.
That's what I thought. Okay.
And we do have Parks and Rec here that could answer that question also.
You can come and answer. Yeah. Thanks.
Angel Ferrara, Director for Parks and Recreation. So that would be correct. It would be for the fishing and boating permits, not for the sale of boats.
And if I may, Mayor. And please note, I'm not trying to pick just specifically on parks when I see best practices, but I do see some, as I stated, like senior programs. I know we have an aging budget as to why we may be able to consolidate some services. I'm just looking at how this was presented as best practice when it's really discretionary funding. But some of this would go hand in hand with a commission mandate or a state and federal mandate. It was just when I see certain things that stick out, like summer camp, I don't know what the costs of those programs are, how they got set up, who requested them. Do we have enough children taking advantage of that? Those are some of the questions that some of us might want to drill down into. And trust me, I'm not picking on parks. It's just when best practices come up with all of these sidebars that just raise some questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. And while I'm up here, I'll just put a plug in for our annual report. It's got a lot of good information and data on numbers and programs and all that good stuff. So make sure and take a look. It could answer some questions. Thank you.
Next department that we're going to look at is the Health Department. They have a total budget of $5.1 million. They have a total FTE of almost 37 people. This is its own separate tax levy fund. Doesn't receive much money from the county general fund at all. And we can see their state and federal mandates or environmental programs, epidemiology programs, general clinic, coroner, and then also medical records and the child care program, and then commission mandates, which are mandates at the local level, family planning services, and lab program, and maternal and child health fees, and then under best practices, we have community health and air pollution match programs. And also most of their they do get a substantial amount of funding through grants that they have, and that's about $12 million.
Commissioner Lopez has a question.
So like, on the health, There you go, I just saw it. Well, like our county coroner, where they're at over off Merriam Lane, like, I didn't know that building, I knew that building, but I didn't know what it was. Now I know. But I was told too that, 7 other counties use that coroner that we use. What are we funding them versus other counties?
You said, what do we do as far as,
Well, we're funding the county coroner, but 7 other counties, or 6 other counties, so I think, or 7 counties altogether, including us, is using him, funding him too. So are what I'm trying to ask is, are we funding him?
they also do pay also.
So we're not
The
paying
other
for the other
county,
counties?
the other 6 counties, we're not funding the other 6 counties.
So we all split the money then within 7?
Yeah, and it's based on the services that are provided. So there is a fee that's paid to the actual coroner, but it's also based on how much activity it is also.
I got you. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you, Mayor. Bynum, at-large one, with the Health Department. So the 5.1 million is the county-funded part of the budget. Is that correct?
Yeah,
And
it's the actual health
additionally-
levy.
Okay, that's the health levy. Additionally, they bring in another 12 in grants. Is that what I heard
Yes.
you say? Okay. Question on the mandates part. Are there no mandates for vaccines? I know they provide them,
You know,
as far as you know.
I don't know, I think I did see Terry here
There she
to answer
is.
that question.
I don't think your mic is on.
Thank you. Terry Garrison, the interim director for the Public Health Department here at the Unified Government. And yes, immunizations is part of the maternal and child health. That is a part of our grant. That's one of our grants. The part that's the commission mandate is we bring in fees, service fees. So that is an account for that, as well as we have match to some of our grants. We have match. Maternal and child health is one of those grants that has a match. So when you see that, that's kind of what that's talking about, is it's revenue that we generate as well as match that we have to pay out or have to match to our grant money.
And I feel like there's quite a few more actual mandates than are listed. We don't have to, dive into every single one of them, but like swimming pools, I think is a local requirement as far as your involvement in making sure that they're safe.
Yes, yeah, that's part of our environmental
Okay.
inspections is aquatics as well as septics,
Oh, okay.
as well as schools
And daycares.
and daycares. That's the childcare licensing is the daycares. Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
And also some background, when you do see the state and federal mandates and the commission mandates up here on the screens for the different departments, there are a lot of different mandates, and one of the things we did was consolidate them to provide a summary. So some of the things that Terry just mentioned, like she said, one of the items was within the environmental programs for looking at the pools. There are a number of other mandates that, if we drill down farther, would show up. But in the sake of providing a summary to the commission, we wanted to make sure that it was in a precise format to explain to you all. The appraiser has almost a $3.2 million. He has 30 FTEs. Everything he does is state and federally mandated, which is personal property assessment and then real estate assessment. All his funding does come from the county general fund, and he is 3% of the total county general fund. And we also can see that as far as his budget, 90% of it is personnel. Next we have elections office. It's a $1.7 million budget. They have 14 and a quarter FTEs. Their funding is via their tax. They have their own tax levy, so that's where all their funding comes from. And we see that most of their services and programs that they offer are either state or federally mandated, or there are some best practices that they do provide. And we see most of the personnel is 65%, with contractual services being 26% of their budget. Transit, county budget wise, it has a $1.3 million budget, and FTEs has almost 13 FTEs. One of the things about Transit's budget on the county side, most of the funding does come from the aging tax levy fund. And we see none of the services there or mandate, they're all best practices, which are services we provide just at a county level to our citizens. And we see that almost 80% of the costs are related to personnel there. Next, we have registered deeds. It has about an $870,000 budget with 7 FTEs. All this funding does come from the county general fund. And we see most of its costs are personnel at about 80%. Next, we have the human services budget. It's total county budget of $715,000, and it has almost 2.5 FTEs. This budget does have its own levy. It doesn't get any funding from the county general fund. We can see everything that it does is state and federally mandated, and we can see that personnel there is 34%, and they also do receive a good amount of grant funding from at the state level. We have aging from the county. It does receive $673,000. And that $673,000 does come from the aging levy, which is shares with transit, and they have 2.2 FTEs there. They also do receive a good amount of grant funding that comes through the state. And we can see that they do have one commission mandated program, but the rest of their programs are best practices. And we can see that personnel ends up being like 34% of their budget, and then contractual services are 51%.
Got a question from Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Bynum at large one. Is aging here?
Yes, they are.
There's Ms. Ruth, because this isn't your whole budget and this isn't all your people. So would you help us there?
Could you ask the question again,
Well,
Ms. Ruth
you have
Jones?
more than 2.2 full-time employees and
12.
you have a bigger budget than.
Yeah, we have 12.
Okay.
And about 80% of our budget is federal and state.
And so I'm going to guess that the federal funding that's provided means there are some federal mandates that go with it.
Of course.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to be a little bit more precise. This slide, I guess, Reggie, is showing us what the county aging mill levy contributes to the area agency on aging. Would that be
That is correct.
correct? Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Like total budget? Do you know it offhand, Ruth?
I'm gonna,
It's okay if you don't.
About 2.9 million.
Okay, thank you.
Our next department that we're going to drill down to is economic development. They have a total budget of $390,000. This amount does come from the county general fund, and the count for the FTEs there are two. And we can see personnel is about 35% of their budget. And the services and programs that they do provide the community are commission mandated, being property maintenance and land bank. Next, we have our infrastructure departments, which consists of building logistics and public works. And the two departments together make up $6.1 million. Building and logistics is a $5.1 million and has a FTE count of 32 FTEs. And we can see as far as commission priorities, it does match three of our commission priorities. It's infrastructure, sustaining physical sustainability, and then also customer service. What they provide as far as commission mandate or facilities, snow removal, facilities maintenance, ground maintenance, and property maintenance, and then also records retention. And then there's best practices that they do provide the community, being meeting support, custodial services, and a holiday program and parking lot maintenance, and then building and assessment programs. Next, we have public works. We have total budget coming from the county general fund of about $970,000. Total FTE is 7. Some of the main things that are happening on the county side within public works are our GIS program and then our road maintenance programs and services that they provide.
Reggie, what is street center line?
I think Chris Cooley is going to come up and answer that question.
Chris Cooley, Director of Geospatial Services. Actually, that's misidentified. The street center line should be a state mandated program. Street center line, as well as address points, proper mapping of those is essential for 911 dispatch and 911 use. There are state statutes that require us to maintain and report that to the state, the GIS Coordinating Council. So that's what the street center line is. It is a street map. Street center line is more of a technical kind of way that we explain it, but essentially it's a street map, accurate data, contains address attribute data about the street network and things like that that's used by the 911 system. As well as, we're using it to support our general mapping and economic development and other activities that might use, require just a street map.
Thanks, Chris.
Our next set of departments are our shared services departments, and these are departments that have both city and county function. And what we did was provide a summary of those. We didn't plan to drill down into those, but those departments are finance, technology, unified clerk, human resources, legal, the county administrator's office, budget office, legislative auditor, strategic communications, commission's office, office of the mayor and CEO, and our operations business office. And again, these again are departments that offer services to both the city and the county, and they're split 70% city and 30% county. That is
Commissioner Burrows has a question.
okay.
Thank you. Reggie, so you've given us all of our total county budget numbers. Those numbers come from the mill levy that is assigned to that particular entity, correct?
So there will be some of those departments that don't have a actual mill levy. Some of those departments do have their own assigned mill levy. But there are a number of them that are just funded out of the county general fund.
Great, thank you. If I may, I'm going to use elections as an example. So they have a mill levy that has been assigned to them, and their budgeted amount this last year from the mills generated was 1.738 million. That's what I can take away from the mill assessment on the elections department, correct?
Yes, yes. So and there possibly could be like some small amounts within their fund that do not fall like right in there within their department. And that would be related to like insurance premiums, things like that, that they have to pay, cybersecurity, those type of things.
Okay. So with that in mind, they have to find the wherewithal to fund those things like that within their budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And their things that are for service that help them provide their services. So that it does come out of the elections levy.
Well, the reason why I ask is because I know that, in dealing with HAVA in the legislature, there was so much money allocated to the election offices to ensure, one, they had modern equipment for elections and be able to pay for whatever was necessary to go on the ballot, as well as to prepare for like a presidential election. And this is one of the first times that I can recall that we had a presidential, I can't even think of the word right now, but just want to ensure that when I look at elections and I look at aging and a few of the others that have the mill levy, that if we're not providing enough revenue for them to operate efficiently and effectively, then the mill levy is up to us to adjust to ensure that revenue stream is met at request, provided the commission chooses to do so. And two, if they're putting too much money into reserves, then that might state they're either not providing services or the mill levy may be too high and they're not expending all of that money. I would just hope that if, as we're coming into election season again, and next year will be the presidential election, that we do everything to ensure that our election office has the resources to do what election office is mandated to do. I guess that's why I just want to ensure that that 1.738945 is what the mill levy is providing them in dollar value. This year's budget? Okay, great. Thank you, Reggie. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of quick questions. Are the FTEs, full-time employees, are they the actual amount that is budgeted for? Or is this the amount we're paying for right now, the FTEs? And is this
It's the amount we have
allocated?
budgeted for.
Okay, so then help me to understand, like, human services FTE count is 2.45. So explain the 4.5. I'm just trying to understand.
So the 4 or 5.
I've seen it before.
So human services, they do receive grants. So what they do have going on in their department, they could have one person that is paid from half a grant and then one person that is paid from the WDDO levy, tax levy.
Okay,
So that was split. So the FTE would split over, some of it was split over into the grant fund.
Okay.
and to make up one
Thank you
whole
for that.
person. So that was the end of our presentation for county mandated departments. I don't know if there's any more questions related to that.
Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, quick question about, let's go back to that elections department. When you were saying they have to pay insurance, you know, so their money, some of that is allocated towards insurance. Is that an insurance that they are told to use, an insurance company that they're told to use, they have to use?
So as unified government, we do have like an insurance broker that we buy insurance through, who goes and find us a carrier. And for instance, like property and casualty insurance is insured by the same carrier for all our buildings. So they are, I mean, in essence, they use the same carrier as all our buildings.
Well, I'm just asking, like, what if, I mean, it's hypothetical, but what if went and had their own broker and said, hey, I found an insurance company that can insure our department. It's going to be a little bit more cost effective for our department.
I don't know legally.
Could they, yeah, is it, I mean, if they just said, hey, I've got this broker guy and he's going to line us out with this and it's going to be more cost effective than what we're paying right now, to help them, put some of those other monies towards equipment or whatever that they would need. Would that be, would that be possible? And that's in other departments that are mandated to pay, you know, insurance as well.
We have a legal answer to that question.
Can you state that again?
Okay, so they're mandated to pay an insurance fee through a broker. I have brokers that I go through as well, but what if one department said, hey, was just shopping and just happened to trip and fall on this one insurance outfit that's gonna line us out and we won't have to, you know, it's more cost effective than what we're paying.
So if you're saying like a department in and of itself wants to go pay a different insurance brokerage fee?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so normally we would have to go through an RFP process to do that. So we would have already done that with whoever we are currently paying.
Okay.
So if there is a situation where a different fee or a reduced fee was found, we could determine at the end of whatever contract we had with the current broker that we could put it out for RFP again to see if we could find a reduced fee. Absolutely. But we wouldn't just be able to break the contract that we had at the time and just switch at that time.
Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you. Do we know if any of these entities that we've discussed here this evening, do any of them outsource some of their responsibilities to a third party that basically they just administer the program? And if they do we get some kind of report back that shows how those dollars were spent, that comes back to CFO or somebody to review to make sure that those programs are meeting the criteria that were RFP'd or spirit of the contract that was negotiated? So that if hypothetically, if one of our departments prioritizes grass cutting, and do we know if that contract, the spirit of that contract is being met on a certain timeline? So if they miss 3 or 4 days, do we get a reimbursement? Do we not pay them? How is that set up? Do we know that the taxpayers are getting what was committed to them in a private contract?
This is Wendy Green with the legal department. Let me tackle a little bit of that first. I will say that it's going to have to depend on a contract by contract basis and probably a department by department basis. So for your specific example with mowing, our mowing contracts do have provisions in them that state if that particular vendor or the mower doesn't meet the requirements of the contract, let's say they don't get out there as often as the contract requires, if they're not doing the quality that the contract sets for, then yes, we can absolutely tell them that their services are no longer needed and we will go find another mower. And in fact, I've had to write that letter before on behalf of the Parks and Rec Department.
Great. I think that's extremely important. If we're going to fund a department and then they're going to subcontract out some of the work, that privatization, here nor there on it, I just want to ensure that we're getting the agreed upon services and that there's a way to monitor that. So that if an agency comes before us and asks for additional dollars to provide those services, that we have a track record or some kind of proof that those services are being provided in a manner that is, one, professional and above board with an RFP. Thank you.
We have the interview presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
So we do have another presentation. Dr. Knieven is
Are there any further questions for Mr. Lindsay in regards to his presentation, Commission? Okay, thank you, Reggie.
Thank you.
Great presentation. We're going to now turn it over to Dr. Shelley Knuven, who's our Chief Financial Officer, and she has a presentation. I asked her to put this together on behalf of the Unified Government and Commission to just really walk us through some of the historical data on our budget. And she did a real good job. She has a more thorough report, Commissioners. If you want to see that, she can get that to you if she hasn't already done so. But this should be an abbreviated version. So, Dr. Knuven?
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. Shelley Knieven, Chief Financial Officer. And as the mayor said, some of the discussions that the county administrator, the mayor, and the commission have all had is, how did we find ourselves in a place where we have financial struggles so that we can chart a course going forward so that we can achieve financial sustainability. And so the purpose of this report is really to look back. The time periods are typically 10 or 20 years, but is to look back at data and just kind of pick up some clues. There's 1,000 more questions this data may cause you to ask, but it's intended to give you kind of a 10,000-foot level of our historical financial condition. So one of the things that indirectly it affects our finances because it's the people we serve, but it's also the people that pay taxes and they pay revenues for services is our population. And so when you look back at our population for the city, the population over the last 20 years has grown about 9,000 people. So it's pretty modest growth, about 6.6% over a 20-year period. There's been more growth on the county side. We've had about 14, almost 15,000 people, which is about 9.7% growth. So you can see that we've had growth, but it's been modest. So it's relatively the same population base that we're serving. And by way of comparison, I looked up this afternoon a couple of the counties surrounding us just to see what kind of population growth they had in the same time period. Johnson County, I assume we would all assume that they've had more significant growth. They've grown 38% over the same time period. Douglas County, where KU is, for example, has grown 17%. Leavenworth County, 17%. And even on the Missouri side, Jackson County, so kind of those counties right around us, has grown 10%. So they're outpacing the growth that we've experienced, but we have had growth. But you can see in the last couple of years towards the far right of the chart that the Wyandotte County is the blue line and it's had an uptick. And you can see that the Kansas City side has had a downtick. And that primarily represents some of the growth that's occurred in Bonner Springs and in Edwardsville, where the county numbers include those jurisdictions and then the city numbers are just the city proper. So just a perspective about our population base. When you look at household income, so of those populations, you can see over the last 20 years roughly, that our household income has been increasing. We benchmarked against the state of Kansas, and what you can see there is that from 2005 to 2023, the state grew from 42,000, almost 43,000 to 70,000. And Wyandotte County grew from 33,000, almost 34 to 60, almost 2,000. So what you can see is that we have lagged behind the state in terms of median household income. But what you can also see is that we've started to narrow the gap. Particularly in the last 3 years, our household incomes have increased by 11%. So that's a positive indicator. But we're still behind the state, but making progress. So we're headed in the right direction in terms of household income. Unemployment is another thing that we look at in terms of, in a way, thinking about people's ability to pay. So what you see here is the green line is the unemployment rate for Wyandotte County. And the blue line is creation of jobs, new jobs. So you've seen a steady increase over the years of job growth, but you've seen a really good decrease in unemployment rates. Again, we benchmarked against the state of Kansas. So in 2004, Wyandotte County was at 9.3% unemployment. And the state of Kansas was at 5.5%. But by 2023, Wyandotte County's down to 3.4%, and the state of Kansas was at 2.7%. So again, it's a good indicator. We've got steady increase of jobs. We have lower unemployment. We have better household income, and generally for the same population, because we haven't had a lot of population growth. So these are good indicators, little ways to keep going, but it is a good indicator in general for our community. I will mention, these are the kinds of things that the bond councils and the bond rating agencies do look at. They want to see growth in population, growth in household income, and a decrease in unemployment. So these are positive trends. Unfortunately, though, while we were making headway on some of those factors, the inflation rate was growing at the same time. And typically, the inflation rate in the Midwest or the US was generally 2 to 3% per year. But as you can see on the chart on the left, you see this huge spike that occurred in 21, 22, and 23. So post-COVID, we saw a huge spike in inflation. And we all know that when we go to the store and we buy groceries or we buy anything, the cost of goods is more. And that has really increased over the last 3 years. So it's a point to consider and to think about when you're thinking about, yes, we're making gain on household income, but those dollars are going not as far because of inflation. In particular, what's happened, there's just some anomalies that have happened in the last few years in terms of inflation. So when you hear a report about the inflation rate, what you should know is what the reporting is the inflation rate year over year. So what this is telling you is that from 20 to 21, the inflation rate was 5.1%. And so what I tried to do is illustrate through the bar chart. Then by 22, it was 8%. So it went up even more, but that's 8% on top of a number that was 5.1% higher. Okay, so it starts compounding. Then you look at the next year for 23 and it was 3.8%. So it's starting to normalize, but again, it is still on a higher base level because that is just a change year to year. And by 24, another 3%. So really over the last 4 years, people in the Midwest and the United States, really across the board, have experienced significant inflation rate growth, about 20%. So it's to keep it in context of understanding the challenges, and I know you all do because you hear pleas for property tax relief, pilot relief. People are looking for relief because things are simply costing more. Their incomes have gone up, but it's outpaced by inflation.
Commissioner Bynum has a question.
Thank you. Bynum at large one. And Dr. Knieven, I understand the compounding side, but I'm trying to make it match up with the graph.
Yeah.
So help me read the graph because I think the graph says in '04, in the Midwest, the inflation rate was 2.5-ish. And
It's-
in 2024, it was 3 point something.
So the graph is the percent change year to year. Okay, so that's the difference. So like, for example, I said, for 24, work backwards will be a little easier. So 24, we're down to 3%. So you see that pretty big steep drop. Okay, it doesn't, and this is why I did the other chart, is it doesn't capture the compounding. This is just year to year rates, okay, and changes in the rates. And so it shows that, yes, it's come back down. We're not having inflation at 8 or 10%. We're having it back to more of a normal 2 to 3%. But you have to always remember that is a compounding number for the consumer on the end of that. Does that help a little bit?
A little bit, but if I understood what you just said, the graph is not necessarily an indication of the actual rate.
It's the rate year to year, but it's not the cumulative impact. So this doesn't look at, in 2004, I started at number X, and each year it went up 2 or 3%. And so doing a comparison to see overall how much has it compounded, I didn't do that. But I feel like it's particularly important for the last few years because we truly have had an anomaly in our economy where inflation has just spiked at an extraordinary level.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also, I might mention in the detailed report, which you do have a copy of, I go through and list out every year. So you can see exactly what it was year to year if you're interested in that level of detail. So you have that for reference. Okay, assessed valuation over 20 years. So what this chart tells you, or what this information tells you, is that our assessed value has grown in KCK and Wyandotte County, both. It's grown, almost doubled in 20 years, or more than doubled, excuse me, in 20 years, 109% for the city and then 114% for the county. So again, as far as bond rating agencies look, they want to see that your property values are going up. Now, I will say that this is a combined number of new growth plus reassessment. But what they're looking for and what we would all really want is that the value of our properties is going up. We don't want the value of our properties to go down. But the downside of that is that the way that our property taxes are calculated, as you all well know, is that if your assessed value goes up, then you're paying more in taxes depending on what the various taxing districts did, because it's an equation based on the value of your property. So one of the things, again, we pulled out, because again, it's an anomaly. Over the last 3 years, we had a similar thing that we saw in the inflation happen with assessed value. And this is not unique to Wyandotte County or KCK. If you pick up any newspaper, you're going to see communities talking about this issue in Johnson County, Jackson County, Lee Summit, Overland Park. It's a universal thing. And it's because the property values went up, which has some to do with inflation, but it also had to do with limited supply. So when there's limited supply, demand is steady, then the value of that property goes up. So there's a positive in that overall our properties are worth more, which is good when you go to sell, for example. But the downside is that means that it potentially means you pay more in taxes. And then over the last 3 years, you can see that we had that same compounding effect. So for KCK, you had 109% assessed value growth, but remember that also includes new growth. So things that all the new stuff that's built in a year. That's not all reassessment. But in the last 3 years, we had almost 14% in assessed value growth. We had 15% in 23, and then in 24, we had almost 12%. So you have a situation where the increase in our assessed value, just like inflation, hit those 3 years. So it was a dramatic increase, 41%. It compounded because, again, when we report out, that our assessed value has gone up, that's on whatever the prior number was. It's gone up a certain percentage based on a prior number. Assessed value, though, does not automatically equate to tax levy, mill rates. That's all decided by each one of the governing boards. And it also is in an aggregate here. This is not per parcel. So individual people did not necessarily see these kinds of increases. They likely saw increases, but it was a matter of, on the whole, this was what had happened. So it really does, in a way, I think, help explain, why we're experiencing taxpayer fatigue. We've got people who are experiencing inflation, so like rapid inflation, so the things they're buying are costing more. The assessed value is going up, which in one hand is a great thing because you would probably hear as many complaints. If our assessed values were going down, you would have people worried about, should I try to get out of my house before the housing bubble burst, which happened in 2008, and people were in over their head. Their houses were not valued at the level that they had a mortgage. So it really cuts both ways, but it kind of helps us see visually where some of those things are coming from.
You can hold on. Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you. Quick question on that last slide. If I take the total county assessed valuation of the 2.193 billion and I subtract the KCK of the 1.948, the difference would roughly be the total assessed value of Bonner and Edwardsville combined?
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
And I have a question. If you, on this slide, this is a great slide, the assessed values have gone up and, those are huge numbers. If you can go back and just kind of reiterate how that translates when you talk about the inflation rate and then coincide that with the incomes, how that, and how that, it poses a challenge to the unified government because it doesn't look like salaries are keeping up with inflation. And then for those that own property, it seems like the appraised values are outpacing both, if that makes sense, which poses a big challenge to our commissioners when they have to try and find that balance of trying to put a pressure point, as I've always said, on property tax increases, especially when you talk about the higher cost for services that the unified government is expected to provide to our residents at a level that's responsible. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little more and how that all correlates.
Yeah.
And then also, I know there's another figure we use because I have a lot of residents that ask me that, we talk about that the cost here at the unified government continues to go up. But I know that they compare that to me with the annual inflation rate, but I think you all use some type of national formula. If you can explain that a little more so the public can kind of understand that it's not kind of apples and oranges per se, when you talk about how you all come up to determining that correlation between the inflation rate and then the percentages that's needed to run governments.
Yes, absolutely, Mayor. So Shelley Knieven, CFO. So all of these numbers play together, okay? And a way to think about this is that my household income is increasing, but because of inflation, those dollars don't go as far. And because my property is going up in value, and depending on what taxing districts do with taxes, then a greater percentage of my household income, if it's outpacing it, a greater percentage of my income is going to pay for that, okay? Just like a greater percentage of my budget is going to pay for groceries when they cost more. So it reduces people's discretionary spending. And you're right in saying that inflation, a lot of people think about the consumer price index, which is the cost of goods and services. There's all sorts of CPIs, okay, consumer price indexes. You can look at the consumer price index for healthcare and compare, like, what are your health insurance rates doing? And are they going up? In most cases, the answer is yes. So it's just trying to balance all of those different statistics. And I pulled these out in particular. I haven't talked about the expense side of our budget. We will here in a moment. But you're right, there is an index that we benchmark against that kind of looks at the growth of budget for cities. in general, across the board each year. Because a city budget's going to include salaries for firefighters, police officers, street maintenance workers, finance people. It's going to have your salaries. That's not consumer price index. That's a different kind of index. It's going to have costs for our construction. There's a different index for construction in terms of what can we build today for the dollar that we have dedicated to capital improvements versus what we had for a dollar 10 years ago. Well, there's a different index for that, and that has rapidly increased as well. So the balance of all of this is exactly what you said, Mayor, which is trying to balance the needs that we have and providing the services which have costs that do go up, maintenance costs on IT technology agreements, cost of increases for the employees who are also experiencing CPI inflation as consumers. So it's balancing all of those things with the needs that we have with what's the tolerance or ability for people to pay. And I know that you all as a group struggled with that through this last process, and I'm sure we'll continue to. And we will look at options with you, give you options in terms of what can be done. I will say that the mill rate, and we'll talk about this here in a minute a little bit more, and then even more when we come back on the workshop on revenues. But the mill rate is a part of our budget on the city general fund. Okay, and I'll drill in on the two general funds because that's where most of our operations are paid for from. And so the mill rate's of maybe say a third of the revenue there. On the county side, it's the majority revenue. Okay, so the funds even are in different situations. And then you look at what do they fund, and that presents its own level of challenges. So you all have a very hard job to balance all those things. I hope that answers in a broad sense your question, but it's looking at the dollars that people have to spend and the services that are mandated. Okay, the presentation that Reggie just went through, and the cost of providing those services, then also complemented with our infrastructure needs, which I know you've heard some of those discussions, and we'll have another presentation in terms of the CIP and the capital needs that we have. And you're balancing all of that to try and balance out how do we meet the needs and make it so that it is within the realm of affordable as best we can. So that's therein lies the challenge of budget.
Thank you. And I challenge the commission as you all move through the budget process, in collaboration with the community. I know there's some, I think you call them dot talks, some budget workshops coming out with the community to look at that and really, and I've said this since I've been mayor, I think we really need to drill down and identify what are essential services when you talk about government. Top of my head, public safety obviously is one, infrastructure, parks, and then the day-to-day operation of our government, which could be administrative. And then everything else on the side of that, I think a hard conversation needs to be asked is, okay, what is a need and what is a want? And really asking our residents to help guide this in a way that's community-driven, to hopefully mitigate some of the sentiment that's out there that that exists with budgeting, and allow it to be more community-driven in a way that we're really meeting the needs of the community based on the recommendations that we get back when we talk about essential service. Because as you know, salaries aren't keeping up with inflation, and those that own property, neither one is keeping up with the appraisals because of the dynamic you talk about, the shortage of housing and several other factors that's not unique to Wyandotte County. That's happening all over our nation. And so when we talk about, people have said, Mayor, please encourage the commission to streamline, to tighten their belt, to operate more efficiently, and that's all great. But when you don't have any more, when you cut off the fat and you cut the meat off, you've even cut into the bone down to the marrow, you really got to have a conversation of, okay, what are needs, what are wants, and then make those hard decisions on, unfortunately, because of where we are fiscally, and I know you're going to present those numbers in further budget cycles, how do we stay out of the red, stay in the black, and operate in a way that's fiscally responsible? And so I just ask the commission to really work with me and work with staff, and more importantly, work with our residents to really decide what are the essential services. And then once we make that determination, what's left, and then really decide what can we live without when we talk about what's a necessity, and there's something that maybe is a practice or something that we're used to having, but is something that is not an essential function of municipal government. So, thank you.
The only thing I would add to that is what we highlighted on the county side tonight was the county funding. One of the things I think people get a little confused about is that we announce we've got a new program, or we're doing this new thing or that new thing. Many, if not all of those, are funded by grants, which those dollars are restricted. And we apply for them because we're asking for those dollars so we can provide services that are discretionary. So I think an important part of the conversation is they may say, hey, we don't need X, Y, or Z. We have to take it one step further to say, okay, is that a grant funded program, or is that really something that's being funded by the unified government through one of our funds? So more conversation can happen around that, but it is an important part of it because we don't distinguish it when we announce some big effort that we're doing, a study or a new program that we got money for from a grant. Which we're glad to bring to Wyandotte County and KCK. So we'll provide more information on that as appropriate. But this other slide was on assessed value, just to highlight. It just illustrates, you can see pretty steady increases each year. And then this kind of 4-year, this rapid increase. It really illustrates that picture for both the city and the county. So with these demographic information, I call them financial demographics. So what you're seeing is modest population growth over a 20-year period. We are seeing growth in median household income. That's great and positive, and we're closing the gap, making progress. But unfortunately, the world experienced COVID. And so inflation had increased significantly, especially in the last 3 years. And assessed valuation grew for reasons of inflation and limited supply in the last 3 years. So the fact that we were making progress is wonderful, and we need to continue making progress on our household income, reducing our unemployment rate, which is getting more jobs to our community, but the region as well. But we can't ignore that we've had these anomalies that affect people every single day. So revenue to expenses, this is the total budget, all funds. Okay, so I'm going to, again, stay at a pretty high level on this because we'll be talking about each one of these things in detail through the whole budget process. But the 25 budget, we had revenue of $468 million. And we had expenses of $473 million, almost 474. So you might go, hey, wait, I thought we had a balanced budget. In our general funds, we do have a balanced budget. So just to note that. And that was the primary area we were looking at. But we also had some funds that had fund balances that were higher than they needed to be. We have a commission-approved policy that says 17% minimum, 25% ideal for a fund balance, which is typical. It's what's recommended nationally by the Government Finance Officers Association. So if you look at this year, we had a couple of key funds that we were spending down some of our fund balances. We spent an extra $2.3 million in the dedicated sales tax because our fund balance was too high. We spent $1.9 million more in the street and highway fund, also on capital project because our fund balance was too high. And then in the tourism fund, which is our hotel motel guest tax that we have, we spent a $2.3 million down from the fund balance on that one as well. And the increase was for capital projects. So this tells a story, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Bigger picture, when you look at the bigger picture on this, out of the last 20 years, we did have 11 of those years where when you look at all the funds that we have, it was called structurally imbalanced, which simply means the new revenue coming in that year is not as much to cover the new expenses for that year. Now, sometimes like this year, it's because we're purposely doing that. There's an intentionality about that. but sometimes there's not. So I started to drill down a little bit more, in particular into our two general funds, again, because those are the funds that pay for most of our operations. So on the city side, you can see that since 2014, the only structurally balanced budget we had was the one that you all adopted for 2025, which quite frankly is remarkable and a compliment to everybody, including the departments, because we also did revenue neutral. So we made a decision to take in less revenue, but we also made decisions to make the necessary cuts to tighten our belt, as the mayor said, in order to be structurally balanced in our general fund. When you look back over those 10 years, again, you've got the detailed report that can tell you the exact years, but some years it was only 371,000 that we were kind of upside down, and as much as 6.2. So I drilled down again a little bit more. I looked at, okay, well, what were we doing in terms of capital projects? And were we making a decision that we have a lot of capital needs and we're going to pay cash for some capital needs? And so out of those years, we had 8 of them that the cash funded capital projects was more than the imbalance. So what that means is we made an intentional decision to fund more to pay for capital projects, okay? We could have not funded those cash capital projects and been balanced for the year, but it was a decision that was made in order to keep advancing a lot of the needs that we have. And it kind of highlights, when I get to the end, one of the things that we've got to figure out a good path forward on is how do we pay for those projects for cash? How do we meet our capital needs? We had 3 years, though, when you look at just those numbers, the total imbalance compared to the capital projects, where it was less than the imbalance. So the capital didn't explain the imbalance, which means that we were funding our annual operations from the fund balance. It wasn't because of capital projects. And that's where that gets very dangerous, because you can't sustain that year over year. And then again, just to highlight, this last year, we're on the right direction. We're on the right path of balancing the budget, and we did so this year. On the county side, so since 2014, we had 2 years that were actually balanced. Those imbalances were between 182,000 to 2.3 million. Overall, the county fund is smaller in size, so you'll see smaller numbers just relative to the size of the whole fund. That should actually, the third bullet should say 6 years. The cash funded projects represented more than the imbalance. So it's the same analogy, or not analogy, same explanation, that we spent more on capital projects that caused an overall imbalance. So we were spending fund balance, but as we all know, in those funds, we don't have excess fund balance. So we're dipping into, and again, that's not financially sustainable. Then in 4 years, even more concerning, we did have cash projects that were less than the imbalance, which means we were using some of those dollars to pay for just normal annual operations, for the county side, the functions that Reggie just went through in his presentation. So it just kind of gives you, again, a very high level look at the world in terms of imbalances and kind of one of the drivers, which is capital cash, that we need to figure out some solutions there other than spending down fund balances, unless it's intentional because that fund balance is too high, like I explained for this year.
Before you proceed, I'd like to give credit where credit is due. When I was elected mayor, one of the things first things I did is I directed the administrator to have an audit. Robert Bob's group came in, they had a thorough, soft audit, which really shed light on a lot of things that we just weren't aware of in our community. One being that structural imbalance, our debt, a lot of other things that just weren't being revealed. So I can say that this commission really took note of that, and I want the community to really, because if you look at where we were in 2020, Robert Bob came in after the election in 2022, came out, and they gave us a stark warning. And I can tell you that this commission took that warning seriously. Staff did, and we've been working diligently ever since to get us where we're at today, to where We were headed to a financial cliff in 2026 and 28. That cliff was avoided through the work and partnership of this commission, staff, and the leadership of our our deputy county administrators and our administrator, and that was pushed out. So now, even with the revenue neutral from last year, we did become structurally balanced. We are operating a little more fiscally responsible. The belt was tightened at the demand and the request of a lot of our residents, and these numbers are reflective of that. And so that doesn't mean the work isn't done, and a lot more work doesn't need to be done, but what it does say is we're moving in the right direction. And I'd like to just reassure the public that this commission has made hard choices and hard decisions, working together with me and our staff to start taking us in a different direction on how we spend and how we budget the public's tax dollars in a way that I think will be positive. And I'd like to say that good things aren't going to happen quick, but hopefully you can see through this presentation and some of the data of these budget workshops that good things are happening along the way. And that the future, if we continue to be fiscally responsible and intentional about how we budget taxpayers' dollars, we can get to the point to where going well into the future, the fiscal situation of the unified government can be bright. So I just wanted to thank this commission and, more importantly, thank staff, Reggie Lindsay, his staff, our administrator, our deputy administrators, as well as our new CFO, for really drilling in and really shedding the light. And part of this presentation, why I had her do this, was because you got to kind of know where you came from to see where you're going, and whatever mistakes were made in the past, not to throw anybody on Front Street or blast anybody or call anybody out about past decisions that will be made, but those are learning opportunities. So we can see where the mistakes were made and understand that those mistakes were already made for us, and commissions, present and future, along with mayors, can know that those mistakes don't have to be repeated, and we can take how we budget the taxpayers' dollars in an appropriate direction. So, thank you.
Okay, so the next slide, again, Shelley Knieven, CFO. The next slide is a look back on our property tax mill levy, because there is so much discussion about that. And you can see that in 1997, which is when we unified, our combined levy, city-county, was 85.96. So that's how much it was in 1997. With the revenue neutral budget, it went down from 75.773 to 67.921. And how that works is that the assessed value has gone up, but we work backwards from the revenue received in the prior year. And then we work backwards because the assessed value went up for lots of reasons: new growth, new construction, and assessed value. And we back into, then what does the mill rate need to be to give us the same dollars we got last year? Not the same mill levy, the same dollars. And so what happens is then you have a reduction in your mill levy. So for 25, for the bills that have gone out for 25, December and May, is when the payments are due. 10.36% was the reduction in the mill rate. But even more important, maybe, because I hear questions asked about whether or not there's been anything good that happened because of unification. Was it more efficient? Were we having cost savings? And this chart illustrates with real numbers that the answer is yes, that the combined mill levies from 1997 to now have gone down 21%. Okay, and that's a lot of combinations of factors. But it's a matter of looking at, well, we were paying so much more then versus what we're paying now in terms of mill levy. Again, there's lots of variables that go into that, but it does demonstrate a positive from having unified.
I got a question on that.
Yeah.
Question I get a lot, and I'm sure our commissioners get a lot, maybe some of you, is we say that, what can you attribute? Because I get that same, I try and sell that. And a lot of residents will say, well, Mayor, look at my tax bill from 1997 till now, and it's steadily gone up. I don't feel or see what you're telling me is reflective in those percentages. And I don't always have a good response, other than I relate it back to inflation, in part, and the cost of doing business here at the unified government. And so I don't know if you had a take on that, when people come to you and say, okay, you can say all that great and wonderful stuff. It sounds good, but look at my property tax bill and I have them all, and it goes up and goes up. I mean, and people, and I know the appraisals play into that when you own property. And we talked about that already. And so the question is that message that you're sharing there, and for those people that are saying that taxes are too high and it's a burden, I may lose my house, I may have to move out of the county. Those are the type of people that I'm trying to reach, and that really I'm trying to work with the commission and staff. How do we help those folks to better understand, and how do we find real relief that can better reflect what you're saying?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Shelley Knieven, CFO. There are a lot of variables at play here. So we can't necessarily say directly, what resulted in that 21%. But what we can point to is the slide that Reggie had in terms of shared services. We don't have two finance departments. We don't have two HR departments. We don't have two purchasing departments. We consolidated all of those functions. And so there is savings and efficiency by having one system. We don't have two computer systems, a financial management system. If you had the county as a standalone governmental entity from the city, you'd have two different financial management systems. And so those are examples of things you can look at that truly there's not duplication of services. Now, a lot of what was talked about tonight in terms of the county services are cost shared with the city side. Okay, I think Reggie mentioned that a lot of those are 70%, 30%, so that's taken into account. But where you get efficiencies outside of just the operations of any one department is by not duplicating. When you duplicate, that's the easiest way to get more efficiency. Don't duplicate. And so you can point to real things that people can understand, HR, that there's not two HR departments. And so we're not duplicating, which in and of itself does make you more efficient. Now, does that equate to 21%? There's too many variables that go into that. But if you still had two separate governments, you would still have two separate shared services. You'd have two separate departments. So just as an example.
Commissioner Lopez.
Shelley, did the amount of employees drop? It did not.
No, it did
Okay.
not. That's right.
Okay, and the record should show also, I'm an old county guy, that at the time of consolidation, the only debt that the county had was the jail. And I think it was going to be retired in 2001 or whatever.
Yeah.
And at that time, they had no other debt. The county did not have any other debt. They were fiscally responsible. Our old county auditor made sure of that. Also, the former legislative auditor that just retired a couple years ago told me at the time of consolidation, the county had $16 million in cash reserve. And when it was combined, it was spent in 2 years. So, there's a lot of hidden things behind all that. I met with Dennis Hayes and I showed him that for 10 years at my residence, only the city and the county rate always went up at least 10%. So, I don't think there's a lot of savings in consolidation. I think only one other county in Kansas has it. Why doesn't everybody else? I just think that, we need to set the record straight. When the county came over and they had the same amount of employees and the county salaries were less, and it took the city or the unified government 2 or 3 years to get them up where they said they were going to do instead of right away. So That's my speech tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Lopez.
Yeah, hey, so you said one system, then why are we using two different systems? Why are we using CIC and Orion when Orion's the best out of all of them? And then we have department heads that have to use both systems and enter it twice.
Yeah,
Why don't we just go straight Orion? And there seems to be some serious problems with CIC. So we just get rid of them completely and just go with Orion with everything. And you have just, I understand that it's gonna be a little bit, we do that. Just go with Orion. It's gonna take some man hours to do what we gotta do. But at the end of the day, we just keep moving forward and have to only enter it once instead of twice. And that's holding up the show there. And with all the discrepancies that CIC already has, why are we even still dealing with them?
Can't answer that, Commissioner Lopez. So
Commissioner Lopez, this is Bridget, Assistant County Administrator. CIC is a system that controls the tax process. Orion is a state mandated program that pretty much uses the appraisal's office is what it's geared for. CIC we've been with that system for a while, and it does have some good things to it. But we do have a team that's looking at trying to figure out what we need to do going forward to transition to a different system. But Orion is mandated by the state for the appraiser's office to use it for the appraiser side. CIC does the calculation for the actual tax side of it. So two different systems doing two totally different things, but the state mandates that the appraiser's office uses Orion. But we do have our tax administration group that is evaluating transitioning over into a new software, but that's why we use two different systems.
Right, well, what I was looking into too is Orion could do everything CIC does.
So if I can add to what Bridget just shared, there is a module that it's through Tyler Technology, who owns this Orion system, that can do the tax side. So as technology evolves, then it's able to do more things. Other counties have implemented it. We have looked at it because you're right. There is double entry. It's very inefficient what we are doing now, and there's a strong desire to move forward on having one common platform, different modules, as Bridget was saying, but one platform. And many counties have moved away from CIC. The appraisers is the one that is more mandated. But it is something we're looking at. The challenge is, honestly, it's a county function. Tax collections is a part of the finance department, which is the treasury division of finance. And then the appraiser is a county function. And we're putting together and getting updated cost estimates of what it would cost to purchase the module and to transition compared to what we're paying now, because you have to pay for current software. So we're looking for what the cost difference is. And that's one of the things that we'll be bringing forward in the CIP. But it's going to take money. And unfortunately, right now, I think we all kind of understand the county side is in a little tougher spot financially. And that's why it hasn't moved forward. But there is a strong desire. It is a better operation. It will be more efficient. You'll have less human error because you've got people literally dedicated to data entry, to data enter into the two systems. So it is something that we're looking at, but it's always that challenge of buying new technology to solve some problems costs money. And these are funded through these sources. So thank you for bringing it up, but it is something that is right square on our radar. It's something we'd like to move forward to. It's just how does it fit into the finances that we have in terms of all the needs that the county general fund has? Does that help?
Yeah, a little bit, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I wanted to shift gears to the BPU pilot because this is also a large revenue source most on the city general fund side. And so one of the things, because we know that people have clamored for pilot relief, and that is something that you all made great progress on in 2025 and reduced it from the previous rate of 11.9% down to 10.9%, as well as introduced other programs such as for seniors to be able to get that pilot waived off of their bill. So you've implemented some programs, but what this shows prior to 25, which is when we reduced it for the residential side, that our pilot rate had really been flat for many years, but our revenue was going up. Okay, so our percentage was flat. The revenue is going up, which what that should tell you is that it was the rates that were going up because it's a mathematical equation. So part of the discussion, and in fact, I was just in a meeting with BPU's CFO, is looking at, not just looking at the pilot, but looking at the rates. Because at the end of the day, what people are asking for relief from is their bills, their total bills. And there's a lot of great promotion that they've done in terms of how people can save energy, save water, save sewer costs, what they can do to reduce their consumption charges. But if you look at this, we've been very focused because for the UG, our part of it is the pilot. We've been focused on that, but really to the end consumer, to the resident that's paying the bill, the bigger issue there has been, honestly, has been the rates. Now, it's not to say that those rates are not needed. I'm sure they are because they have aging infrastructure and they're having to maintain a system and they do things for efficiency. But I've encouraged them that when we have future sessions with them to share information about that. This is what their rates are now, but if they weren't doing some of the things that they are doing, they could be so much higher. So this will also be important in terms of thinking about different strategies in the future of how we could bring that pilot down even more, okay? And balanced with, this is a large funding source for the city general fund, which again, that's the fund that pays for fire, police, streets, I mean, our core services. So trying to figure out ways to balance all of those things, the needs versus what people are paying and what they can't afford to pay.
Let me back up on, can you use that slide? Again, I appreciate the commission for voting last year off the recommendation of myself and the county administrator to really focus on the pilot, which was 11.9%, moving it down to 10.9%. I know there's a commitment working with the administration's office and our CFO. The goal is to get it down to what would equate to a franchise fee with other utilities of the average of anywhere between 4 to 6%. That's the ultimate goal. A lot of people don't like to say it, but I'm going to call it like it is. It's a tax. The only struggle that I've had with this tax is I've gone to meetings with other mayors and the Kansas League of Municipalities. I sit around the table with mayors and city managers from other cities. The struggle for me to try and grasp is they have sales tax and they have property tax. We not only have sales tax, property tax, we have special taxes, be it police, EMS, infrastructure, things of that nature. We also have a little bit of casino money, but a lot of these other cities don't own a municipal utility to where they have a pilot. And these other communities tend to have robust budgets. And so even with this, that's something that I really challenge staff to look at is how is it that other municipalities operate fiscally responsibilities for years? And the BPU, I'm not sure exactly when the pilot came into existence. I know I got that information somewhere, but bottom line is we have more funding streams and more funding revenue streams than a lot of other cities. And yet we're still fiscally challenged when you talk about our financials. And so I don't know why that is. But bottom line is appreciate, I had a call for action to really look at the pilot on how we can reduce it. Commissioner Bynum has taken that head on, not just last year, but she took it again this year, working with both our staff, BPU staff, and then I believe it's Rose Mulvaney Henry, who's one of the board members at the BPU, as well as Commissioner Hill and Ramirez. And so we appreciate that. Taking the pilot off the bill is one of the things that I've said we need to look at. That is a very complex thing to do based on some language in our charter that at some point this commission is going to have to look at to really decide what that really means when you talk about what's in the charter when it regards to the pilot and BPU. But the easiest way to address the pilot is continue to doing what we're doing, which is trying to make it a point, and I encourage this commission to really see that as an option of annual decreases of the actual pilot, like you did last year, 11.9 to 10.9. I challenge staff to hopefully get a recommendation to this body to even take that further down to 9.9, and every year slowly chip away at this pilot in a way that even if we can't take it off the bill responsibly, we are still gradually providing our BPU customers some level of relief. But ultimately, what's going to happen when we talk about taxes and BPU and all those things, we've got to expand our tax base. I think we've all recognized that. Economic development has to be key. I'm glad we have a new economic development director that's in place, working hard. Ms. Chisholm is working hard to try and bridge that gap and really market Kansas City, Kansas, and Wyandotte County way to bring in housing and businesses that are going to provide jobs, but more importantly, anchor people in Wyandotte County and in houses, so we can expand our tax base that can give this governing body more opportunities to hopefully find ways to reduce our reliance on property taxes. And I think that's something that's doable, but it's got to be intentional. I know Commissioner Burrows and Commissioner Stites are on a task force as well, looking at that aspect to look at policies and how we can reduce the bureaucracy of doing business here at the unified government, which has been problematic for a lot of developers. And so I know the administrator's looking at several options. So if we can do that and get more businesses here and anchor residents in Wyandotte County, expand our tax base, I believe that it's going to offer more opportunities to not only reduce property taxes, but then also bring about those needed funds to hopefully reduce the pilot in a way to where you've heard me say it, where the BPU can at least be considered more of a benefit to our residents as opposed to a financial burden when you talk about some of the taxation and user fees that coincide. One thing that our CFO didn't talk about, or maybe you did, but I'm going to reiterate it, was the reason those revenues keep going up is because the BPU board, based on their discretion and their needs, and I'm not always sure what that looks like, but every time they raise their rates, that 10.9 is allocated from those additional revenues, and that's how that number keeps increasing. Am I correct, CFO? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bynum.
Would it not also be fair to say that another thing that might drive pilot revenue higher is new growth? When you have another account come online that's using water and lights, you're collecting more revenue on the utility side and more pilot revenue.
So Commissioner, in the detailed report, written report, I took a look at that.
Okay.
I looked at the growth in accounts, and then I also looked at the growth in consumption. And they're not having significant growth in accounts. It's netting very, very much the same. And then they're not having growth in consumption. So it really does point to the rates. But some of that is because, for example, houses are now more energy efficient, you know, and so it may be there's some offset of some of the growth and the consumption with energy efficiency. So again, in every one of these slides, there's not like one big silver bullet that's going to explain away everything. It's just observations about different aspects that we rely upon. But I did take a look at that, and that analysis is in the report, the written report.
Thank you.
Okay, so expenses by fund. So we talked about overall budget, all funds. We talked about the county and the city general fund. If you look at just in the last 4 years, I took a look at the last 4 years, what has the budget done? And so what you can see is in total, the budget grew from in 22, about 420 million. And that's again, all funds, to 474 million in 25. So it has grown. And again, you can see over on the far right, the areas where we saw the growth. because that's been one of the questions, is that our budgets have gone up. And where has that money gone? Well, as we talked about at the last workshop, a big part of it is debt, that we have increased our reliance on debt, which causes the annual principal and interest payments to go up. So just in the last 4 years, we've seen an 18% increase on the city side for bond and interest. Okay, so of that growth, 8.7 million was just to pay for debt. Okay, in the written report, there's more detail in terms of that. I didn't put slides in here because we've already covered that. But that's the greatest area where we've had an increase. General fund for the city has increased 8.6%. Like we said earlier, just as citizens are experiencing inflation, so is the county and the city government. So on the city side, we have had an increase of 8.6% or 8.6 million. County side, 7.8 million. So you can see that there's been an increase. Commissioner Burns raised the point about the number of FTEs. One of the appendices to the written report is an analysis of a number of employees by department. So it might be a good thing to look at, and me too, to analyze in terms of the overall growth of employees. But you do have inflation as well as, frankly, new technology. In the last 4 years, we bought a system that we used money for out of bonds, but we used money for. It has gained tremendous efficiency, but technology costs money. And so that's just looking at some of those things that have impacted the overall budget. And then the sewer fund, you can see, accounts for 6.3 million, which we know that we have a consent decree that we're complying with. And so we've been ramping up our expenditures related to the sewer fund. So when people say, well, where'd the money go? That's the answer. That's the primary answer, is those 4 things is where the money went in terms of the overall increase in the budget. And we could drill down and get into lots more detail at another time in terms of, well, what did that buy me? Like what projects were included? And there is that detail. And it's not to say those things aren't needed. It's just, where did it go?
Thank you. And before I get to Commissioner Lopez has a question, but before I get to that, I'd like to again give credit to this commission. Working with the administrator, I made a recommendation that we use 50% of future incentives that come online to go towards retiring our debt, those funds, as well as 10% of all new development growth. That's why economic development and building that growth in our community is so important, because we can retire that debt, and that debt is our residents' tax dollars. And when you talk about 44%, you didn't mention that, goes towards retiring debt. That is huge. And so I'd like to again give credit to this commission of seeing value in taking the necessary steps to work towards trying to retire this debt, which is a huge portion of what's being spent when you talk about taxpayers' dollars. Before we get into Commissioner Lopez, and you can answer this question next, I don't even know if you have it, but I've never heard, out of what we pay on our debt, how much of that is actual interest as opposed to
Sure.
principal?
Answer in a general sense. It'll vary every year because as you're paying down principal, just like a debt you would have, then you start out with lots of interest and then you're paying less interest over time, but it's generally about half.
About half.
And if you look at, so in the presentation we did at the last time we gathered, we talked about the total amount of debt. We talked about, trying to get away from using debt to fund very small projects that we need to find ways to fund through cash. And trying to find ways to reduce in general how much we're spending on debt, because it's always more expensive. You're going to pay interest. And you're going to pay issuance fees. You're going to pay all the costs that go into doing a debt issuance. So it's one of the things that is definitely on radar. And again, we're on the right path. It's not going to be an easy process that is presented to you all. We'll give you all the capital improvements needs we have. Last week, we gave some ideas of ways to manage debt and still keep making some headway on some of those capital needs, but we simply can't do it at the pace that we've been doing it at. We can't sustain that. So hard choices are going to be facing this commission of which capital improvements we can afford to do. So it's just being disciplined about the future in order to kind of right size the amount we're spending on debt. It's not bad that we have debt. It's just to the mayor's point, and I think David has said this as well many times on the city side, where most of our debt is, Commissioner Burns is right. We don't have as much debt, nearly as much debt on the county side. But on the city side, 44% of our property taxes are paying for the annual principal and interest payment. Okay, 44%. That's not going to operations. On the county side, it's 6%. Okay, so it's much more measured in terms of what it's costing from the property tax component. But it's just, again, looking at what those needs are and the challenges that face this unified government.
So let that sink in for the public that's watching. So out of that 44%, almost half is interest. And so that's why it was really important that I put that information out, that this commission is working to chip away at that principal and interest that is costing us so much. These are dollars that could be sent elsewhere. The only thing that I would challenge the commission and staff is, how do we avoid not adding to that bonded debt? So we're not spinning our wheels on this treadmill of never getting and digging ourselves out of debt. And so that's the huge challenge, especially when you try and balance necessities with wants and some of those mandated needs that are out there. So thank you. Commissioner Lopez.
So where's the money going? Good question. Because I see some departments that are just blowing money on that doesn't need to be, just different things like that. That it seems like nobody's watching, or they're not saying anything, or they just let it go, or whatever. But I've seen some idiotic spending you wouldn't believe. That does, and that's just one department. What about other departments? I don't know. I just happen to see one and hear about some, and I'm like, are you serious? Why didn't anybody say anything? So there's, and we should keep a closer eye on what where they're spending it and exactly what they're spending on. I want to see receipts, things like that. But yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're almost to the end here. So looking at by department, because again, the last slide was looking at in the aggregate and looking at in particular a couple of funds. So you can see that, like I said, the most of our expenditures for operations are in the city and county general fund. And as Reggie's presentation highlighted, a big part of our budget is personnel. And so when we started looking at where we had increases, and this is over the last 10 years, again, details, and if you want to look at different time periods, you're welcome to do different calculations. But over the last 10 years, the fire department budget grew by almost 33 million. So they're at 80 some million now. 10 years ago, they were at 50 some million. Okay. So they've had a 64% increase. Police has increased by 24.8. Public Works without the sewer has increased by 24.3. Sewer is increased by 21.8. Sheriff is increased by 21.8. And Parks has increased by 9 million. So what that says is what the priorities have been, where we've been putting our money has been in public safety and in infrastructure, which are obviously very crucial components to government. It hasn't been going to discretionary type programs. You can certainly argue that there's expenditures within departments that could be streamlined or reduced, but this just gives you a picture of this is where we placed our emphasis. And then it plays out if you look at the number of positions, and it is true that in the last 10 years, we've added overall 188 positions. And then if you look at where some of those positions have increased, you can see again, it's related to the expenditures, right? Because our departments are mostly people. A fire department is mostly people. A police department is mostly people. A sheriff's department that runs a jail is mostly people. And so you can see that's where we've had increases primarily throughout the entire government, opposed to other departments, which have only grown modestly about 5%. So just, again, there's 1,000 reasons why these things are so. So it's not to necessarily say this, you should conclude something off of this, but it's just to highlight the numbers, the facts of the numbers. These are the numbers.
Now, question. Out of all that, is that strictly personnel or is that just the totality?
Totality.
Okay, so if you're just talking personnel, what would those numbers be? Do you have that?
I don't have that. We could certainly, well, it's on one of the attachments and I could get that for you. I could break that down for you.
And so here lies the question is, I think maybe a performance audit, or some type of performance study of these crucial areas maybe could be in order to look at where can we find efficiencies when you talk about not so much the personnel, but kind of going in line with what Commissioner Lopez talked about, where are we spending our money? And what are we spending our money on? And again, we break it down to, are these essential services that we're spending money on, that, well, items that provide or facilitate essential services, or are these wants and needs? And what's a necessity to really make sure that we try and avoid, waste, abuse of taxpayers' money, or misuse of taxpayers' money, and really drill down and take a hard look at what these departments are actually spending their money on. And then sometimes, I know when I was on the police department, when we faced financial difficulties, the chief came to me and said, I need you to cut 5% out of your budget across the top without reducing the level of service that our residents have come to expect. Now, I pay you good money, Tyrone. You find a way to make that work. And I did. And so sometimes if we rely on our staff professionals, they can sometimes find a lot of cost savings if we give them those opportunities and we really put that pressure on them to cut costs. It can be done responsibly. I'm confident because I had to do it. I didn't have a choice when I was on the police department in various positions, and I was given that mandate. There was a lot of things that I wanted. I might have wanted extra radios. I might have wanted extra laptops. I might have wanted extra printers, maybe a car here or there. And I had to put that on hold because at the end of the day, my priority, at least when I was on the police department, was providing those, police officers getting to those calls and answer those calls for service. And then what did that entail? Also to help keep officers safe and the public safe. So I don't know, when you look at that, I don't know what all those ancillary costs are that may be out there, but taking a hard look at where are we spending our money? How is it being spent? And can we squeeze some cost savings out of some of those things that aren't personnel? I support all our employees, and we want to make sure that we protect their salaries, their benefits, and their positions. But it's some of those other things that maybe we need to take a hard look at again and really make a determination. Are these truly necessities, and are we really being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars? Commissioner Lopez.
So this is what I'm getting at is, and I'm just gonna be the elephant in the room here, but like, we got like fire chiefs have their take-home vehicles. Friday afternoon, they're fueling them to the top. Then come Monday morning, you gotta fuel them to the top again. Where are they driving all weekend? Are they going to Lake the Ozarks with them? Or, some of them have soccer games for their families or soccer kids or whatever in the back of them driving around. I mean, at what point are we going to be paying a huge lawsuit when somebody rear ends them and a bunch of kids get hurt? If they're, even out of county, they're in Olathe, they're in Johnson County, they're somewhere. Who's watching them? Who's saying, hey, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be driving this with family in there or friends and families? And again, however many vehicles that is on a Friday fueling when they're not working, come Monday morning, they're fueling to the top again. That's a lot of money. The fuel is not cheap. I mean, my fuel bill is, I think I'm paying 10 grand a week. So, I mean, I can't imagine. It's little things like that. Things like that add up. You know, whoever other departments have take-home vehicles, are they doing that? I mean, it's like, who's watching? Who's policing that? That's my question. That's a lot of spending that we don't need to be doing.
Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Administrator, staff, this information was absolutely warranted. And the historical review that you did, I read the documents, very thorough. I sincerely appreciate it. It really puts a picture and it validates some of the concerns many of us have brought forward over the last handful of years. It also provides a roadmap for us on how we can correct and get ourselves in a more stable financial position long-term. And I don't know how you put all this together the way you did in chronological order, but it was an easy read. And I really appreciate all the research and work that went into it. That, as I stated, it does validate some of the concerns that have been raised, but it also provided a roadmap and ways in which for us to address some of the concerns that we've had. So I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Administrator, Mayor, for putting this together. I hope the public appreciates this as much as I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you. Mayor, to your point, I have a request / question for staff. And if it's too simplistic, you can just say so. But when we talk about crafting a budget around needs and not wants, the question that I have is, for example, we know that the fire department must do these things, but they also do these things. And so what's the cost of what they must do? What's the cost of the other stuff they might be doing that they don't have to do? The election office must do these things, but they're also doing this. Like, are you able to actually bring us by division or department the cost of the things that we've been through? Like, for example, on this county presentation tonight, you've told us what's mandated or examples of what's mandated. So there are things that must be done by some of these departments. I don't know if that's too simple, but it drives right to the point that the mayor is making as far as needs versus wants. You have a department that must do this, but is also doing this, and the also doing this part might be because the community said, we want that. So I think we have to balance that. I'm just curious if that's a realistic request. And then my second question is this, to Commissioner Lopez's point. I don't know if you're suggesting that the fire department or any other department take-home vehicles are fueling up on Friday and again Monday morning, or you're alleging that that's happening. But our fuel people know who's filling up when. And if that's a real thing, we can certainly figure it out. It won't be that hard. If that's real, then that evidence could be brought forward. And then we'd know, is that fat that needs to be cut? And I'm not suggesting that that's necessarily your job, but the people running the fuel pumps know who's fueling up and they know when and they know how much. I guarantee it. So that would be interesting to find out if that were truly happening. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Administrator? Administrator? Oh, you had nothing? Oh, Commissioner Burns.
Along that fact with the fire and taking home vehicles, let's alleging that it's happening. Let's not say it's happening. I think that's important. We don't need to discredit employees that are really doing their job or not doing that. So let's alleging. you know, we can find out, but let's be very careful on how we do that.
Just me working here, I think the concerns of, when you talk about what Commissioner Bynum mentioned and Commissioner Burns and Commissioner Lopez brought forward, I mean, some of this, it goes back to leadership. I mean, we've got an administrator, we have assistant administrators, we have directors, managers, supervisors, frontline supervisors. Some of this stuff, and it goes back to leadership and individuals holding their direct reports accountable to expectation, not just of this commission, but to the public, because I get some of those complaints too. And, you know, people ask me, well, why is this employee doing X? And why did I see employee behind Price Chopper sleeping for 3 hours? You know, I got it on the police department. So some of this stuff, we're dealing with people. And so a lot of times it goes back to having good leadership and good managers that are really staying on top of their people to hopefully address and get the most bang for their buck out of the workload that our employees are expected to produce every week. So that's part of it. And I know that our administrator and his team are trying to address those concerns as well. So some of that may not just be those things are being done because it's just being allowed. It's just sometimes managers and supervisors, they don't know what they don't know. And so if we see and hear those things, really just getting that information to the appropriate manager, supervisor, so they can address those things administratively, sometimes alleviates those problems. Administrator.
I think the genesis to your question, Commissioner Bynum, was reflected in a lot of the work that you saw in Reggie's presentation of the county's departments, when you saw the mandates and he used best practices, and it was revealed it's the discretionary things, the things that they don't have to do. But as your question said, lots of those are what the public wanted, and the commission in the budget process has said, even though it's not mandated through the years, the public wants it, so we're going to fund it. And so over the years, they become institutionalized programs. But still, they're not mandated. We saw that in my first budget process with the commission, where I remember there were 21 things that the commission asked for when we were talking about tightening the budget. There were 21 discretionary commission programs that weren't mandated, but those were community programs that the community liked, that you provided, but we did not cut them because you thought they were too valuable of services that were provided to the community. So we did not cut them. But that's why we went to priority-based budgeting, and we started really this year trying to bring that philosophy into this budget process. And you'll see it deepened into future budget processes. And that's the format that Reggie and Michael and the budget team brought in the format that you saw this year. And we're trying to reveal to, excuse me, the departments to start thinking that way. Things that they've taken for granted that they view as mandates because this is what we've always done. You need to think critically about it. What are mandated and then what are discretionary, that when time comes, like when we need to really look at budget challenges, what can we shave out of our budgets? And then services come out of our portfolio for savings. It's going to be those discretionary services. Now, some of those decisions are going to be tough because some of those discretionary services are ones that are favorable to our public, but they're not mandated. We have to provide what's legally mandated or contractually mandated. But the discretionary ones usually are the ones that we enjoy providing our public. And cutting them out are tough choices that we have to make. But those are the easiest choices to make because they're not tied to legal requirements. But the revelation that they're not required is something that is culturally, we get an awareness that just because we've been doing them for so long doesn't mean they're mandated. But when we have tough choices that we have to make due to budget reasons, we have to categorize it like that. And so we're pleased that we've discovered priority-based budgeting to help us become aware of the services that we make, and we can categorize them like that. So when we have these discussions with you, we can help you make the best informed decisions for our public. And some aren't going to be easy choices. Some are going to be very easy choices, but it makes for good dialogue because our goal is to make the best public service decisions for our public with the resources that are given to us. We know we don't have unlimited resources, but with the resources that we have, what's the biggest bang we can make to serve our public? That's our goal. And I think we're here to help you make that decision. So we brought priority-based budgeting into our world, and I think you'll see it more effective as the years go by, but we started in earnest this year. You'll see them deepened every year, and we'll see more and more participation of our staff, have them understand it better, because they're the ones that do the work, you know? And you'll see it better as years go by. But you remember when we had 21 things, no, we can't do that. Oh, that's so popular. Well, we're going to have more of those types of discussions. But that's what makes public work inefficient, the public work, because we have to make those tough decisions because we're touching people's lives. So do you have one more screen you want to talk about?
Before you do that, thank you. The other thing that I asked staff to look at is as well as our procurement process, some of our policies. There's a perception that certain entities in this county or outside this county get forever contracts and without RFPs. And so I'm having the administrator look at some of those dynamics to make sure that there's equity in our RFPs, our requests for proposals, to make sure there's no cronyism when it comes to who gets these contracts and for how long, because there is that perception that if you're privileged, you're connected historically within the halls of this government, that you sometimes get the hookup. And I want to make sure that that's not the case, that we do have a robust RFP process that can probably bring sometimes better services that we're asking for at a lower cost. And so that, I know that's one of the things that staff and administration is looking as well, is how do we improve our procurement process? Number one, not just to find cost savings, but to also make sure that it's equitable and it's fair for everyone, because I get a lot of complaints from folks that are saying they can't even get in the process, and a lot of folks feel like they're being left behind when it comes to how we delve out contracts to certain vendors. And I know that there are certain vendors, I know that personally because I worked here, that have had long-standing contracts since I've been here at the Unified Government when I started in 1987. And these folks, I don't know how they keep getting these same contracts over and over again, but that's something we need to look at. Can we get the same or better quality of service at a cheaper price, and making sure that these contracts and who they're given to are equitable? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will say that that has been a priority, and I am pleased to report that we are putting many things out to bid. If you go out and look at our website, if the public's listening, I encourage you, register as a vendor, and then and you can pick what it is that the work is that your company does, so that you will get notified if we have a bid that's going to do mowing or a bid that's going to do whatever. You'll get notified of that in addition to just going and looking periodically, because we do want to make sure that we're following a proper procurement policy, and we're looking at the current policy, and we'll likely be bringing forward some enhancements to that policy for consideration. So just to wrap up this conversation, again, there's not one particular thing that just says, well, here's exactly what happened and where we got to where we were. But what we do know is that there's a couple of key things that we can do to get on the path going forward of financial sustainability. If we balance the budget every single year, okay? And if it's not balanced, it's done knowingly, okay? Like we're spending down in excess of the fund balance, where we have that in pockets, but not across the board. But having a balanced budget, containing expenses, you all were just talking about that, and the importance of containing expenses that are based on the available funding for required services. There's key words here. And then also balance, though, against these other priorities that the commission and the mayor have expressed, such as property tax and pilot relief. So it's really balancing all of those things, and it takes containing expenses. And then, as we've talked about a couple of times, reducing debt, which I feel like we've got a good path forward. It'll be a harder path, but a good path forward. But we do need to figure out new ways or different ways to fund some of our capital with using cash. Because what we've done is we've gone creative, even for, say, fire trucks is a good one, where we're using capital financing. It's not bonds, but we are using capital financing, and that's funding it over a period of years, because those trucks have a life of more than just 1 year. And that way you can spread the cost out. It's a very good practice, actually, but it also starts locking down future years' discretionary budget, because it's committed. It's committed to that fire truck. So we'll be sharing information about that as well, just kind of like looking at things a little differently through a little different lens, and figuring out ways to pace ourselves. We have a lot of needs, and I hope your takeaway from this presentation is not that the staff was saying that things were done in the past because they weren't needed. It was just making the decision to get things. It's because we have a lot of needs. We have aging infrastructure, and we have a demand for a level of service. And that's where it gets down to it's discretionary or it's required. And then you have to keep drilling. Okay, it's a required thing. What's the level of service that we want to provide? Okay, we want a certain response time. We want 911 to always be answered. We want, these are the things that are standards of level of service that have cost. So it's balancing all those things, which is a challenge for the directors, the budget team, the administration, and you all to try and find the right balance. So I think we do have a path forward, and you all have taken big steps in that direction with doing the property tax relief through R&R last year, and looking at reducing pilot, and we'll keep strategizing about how to do that. But we also know that we are experiencing inflation just like everybody else is, and the cost of business does go up. And so we have to balance those things, or we don't do discretionary things, or the level of service is reduced. So it's just making sure that we have good information as much as we can provide for you to make good decisions. So again, this is hopefully a takeaway just to say, here are some of the things that brought us to where we are now. We're on a new path. If we stick with that path, that really will put us in a position to be financially sustainable for years to come. You balance your budgets, you contain your expenses, and don't issue as much debt. And
guess
thank you.
I would like to close this session to let you know that we opened up the internal budget process with our staff on the operations side today. And the message to them is we're taking a conservative approach in the budget process and ask them to develop the operations side on a three conservative approach. We've had discussions with a couple of the commissioners over the last couple of months. We know that that you have all had conversations with many of your constituents, that you've read messages on social media and all that, and that there is significant demand on a conservative approach on budget for this year, that we've asked them to do three scenarios. One, a revenue neutral approach to budgeting. One is a no new revenue budget, which means if you are going to do new initiatives, you also need to look at cost savings out of your existing budget. So you're pretty much a neutral if you, so it's a little different than revenue neutral. It's a different approach, but ask that. But also, we also let them know that some of the information that our appraiser gave us that you all had on threes with Matt about what to expect on possible maximum mill increases would be available for us. It's not going to be at the level that we saw in 22 and 23. We told our staffers that, yes, we viewed the revenue neutral budget year for this year as a pause. Don't think we're going back to the 22 and 23 years with that huge property tax levy increase to be available to us. Matt was saying maybe 6, no more than 9%, and 9% was generous. That what we heard from some of the commissioners, if it's 6, don't ask for 6%. So on the property tax levy. So I think some people were hoping that the legislature would give us the cap. We did not get that, but it's that type of philosophy. Don't ask for the max. Ask if we're going to get something, don't go for the max. And so the message to the staff is be prudent when you start looking for new revenue for your services. And when we have those discussions internally, that's what I'm going to be expecting if they're going to go with that third scenario and justify what you're asking for. And we're not looking for increased personnel because that's usually the big ticket item in any budget. And so tamper down your expectations is what the message was. So that's how our staff is going out in their operating budgets. I think we also we know our capital needs are high, but if you're going to be asking for any capital needs, you're going to have to prioritize them, because as we've had the debt explained to us in the previous thing, you got to talk about how much are you willing, commissioners, allow debt, how much debt are you willing to accept for the 26 budget? And then how do we appropriate that to each department? And so we need to know the debt expectation from each department. So when we appropriate the amount to each department, we know how much we can fund. And then those that we can't fund go back into the shelf. And so they're going into the budget process with their eyes wide open, with conservative expectations. So we're letting you know how they are going into the budget season with that message. So you hear it from your administrator tonight. Yes, sir.
Mayor,
Sorry, Mayor.
Mr. Administrator, I'd like to recommend that we limit the budget workshops to 2 hours. It's not fair to the employees, and it's not fair to the public. I think you lose attention after 2 hours. You do a great job. I'm not saying that, but if you can't get done in one session, it could carry over to the next one. And I recommend we limit it to 2 hours.
Okay. Thank you so much to our budget director and our CFO and their teams for great presentations. Appreciate our CFO. That was a lot of work, Commissioner Burrows, that they put in, her and her staff. I asked them to do that again because I really thought it was important that not only the commission, but the public know, how do we get to where we're at and how do we improve that dynamic moving forward so we don't keep repeating the same mistakes. And so she put together a real good report. There is a thorough report. Hopefully you all got it. If you didn't, just reach out to our CFO, our administrator, and we'll be sure to get it to you. I think the overriding goal of that I took away from tonight's meeting was we are moving. This commission public is moving in a way for this unified government to operate more efficiently, to be more streamlined, to be more fiscally responsible, to be more customer service friendly, and to be more financially sustainable and stable in the years to come. So thank you all for your time. I have no further business unless a commissioner has another comment. I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call, Lopez.
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows, Burns.
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
Wait a minute. Mayor, I need your vote. Say yes.
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you. David? David?
I don't.
No, I'm gonna address